September, beginning of September, what, September 3rd? And of course, you'll get this video a day later. Winter's starting to come about. I'm figuring by next month, we'll probably have to start the wood stove at some point. Thinking about how we're gonna get ready. You gotta get the firewood transferred into the house and let it start drying out a little bit because it's been so rainy this year. Put some firewood on the porch, get our backdrop put back up. We gotta, you know, we'll put a white tarp here this year. And I noticed that white tarps don't really degrade with UV. So we're gonna go with white. Although UV is not a problem in the wintertime. And so we'll stack up some firewood. So this will give us about 2 to 3 weeks of firewood stacked on the porch. About 5 days in the house. Get it all to dry out. So I've been splitting it and testing it, make sure that it's at its 20% or less. Because your firewood on these new wood stoves with the reburners have to be 20% or less of moisture content. And so I've been splitting it. I've got this little wedge thing. It comes with a hammer. You set your board in there, or your log, and you just whack it with the hammer and it splits. And then I got my moisture tester. You buy these off Amazon. If I remember, I'll put a product list on the video. Just touch the screen, product list pops up. You can click that product list, and I'll put one of these moisture testers on it just for those who be interested in it. Buy that from Google. And then it's got 2 probes on it. And you just test it. It tells you what the percentage of the wood is, the moisture in the wood. And so this particular log was 15%. So good and dry, exactly where I want it. Don't have any worries this year. Last year, we were right out on the edge of 20%, 19%. You get creosote in the chimney. The year before, we had chimney fires. We had 2 of them because we had so much moisture in the wood. We just moved here, just got the wood split. We kept trying to buy some firewood that would be dry, but nobody. They say it's seasoned, but it's like, you know, 1 season, not 2 years. So 2 years and 15%, the bark flaked right off, just like we should. Sounds hollow when you clank the wood together, like a 2x4. If it's wet, you'll hear that thud, but this will be, you know, that little echoey sound. It's lighter, you can just tell. I'll start stacking firewood probably about September 15th. Onto the porch. I would like to get the snakes and the lizards to calm down a little bit in the firewood stacks. I got this stack over here, but I can't seem to get this to dry out. It's older rotted wood a little bit. You can see some of it's got some of that moss stuff growing on it. And every time it rains, it just soaks up the moisture. Now, somebody asked me that question a long time ago. I don't know if I ever answered it. When it rains, in the greener, you know, I guess, I don't know how to explain it. Water doesn't get sucked up in it unless it's rotted wood. And that rotted wood, it's like a sponge. You can cut a tree down and lay it on the ground and it will get spongy and rotted. But if you can keep that log, the whole tree, off the ground, it will, of course it takes a lot longer for it to dry because you need to have it split in small pieces. But it will dry, it won't rot. But I think everybody needs to be doing something to think about their heating and air conditioning situation. And I know most of Americans don't think there's a situation right now, but prices are going to go up. There's just no way around it. We've talked about Europe, and I don't like making a comparison between Europe and the United States. I do think there's some differences. I mean, even in the United States, states do things differently. Somebody reminded me about New York. Last year I made a video, New York's trying to restrict firewood stoves, wood stoves. I made a video, I couldn't remember it, and so I brought it up a couple days ago, and somebody reminded me that they're no longer selling wood stoves in New York, is what this woman told me. So that could be true. I'm not sure, I didn't look it up. But so like here in Missouri, I mean, you can buy wood stoves at Home Depot, but in New York, you can't buy them at all. If you're wanting a wood stove in New York, here's what I would recommend. Go on Facebook Marketplace and see if you can find one out of state. Carolyn just found one for 300 bucks here in Missouri yesterday, and by that evening it was sold. My mom was looking at wood stoves and she's worried about her health and trying to split firewood, that kind of thing. My suggestion would be if you can find someone who will deliver it, you might want to look, see if there's somebody selling it pretty cheap. If you can get a cord for 300 bucks. Now a cord lasts us about a year. So we live in a 200 square foot house, and I don't know if the math would actually work on this. Of course, our house is sealed up really well. But if you had a 400 square foot, so you might want to think about doubling. I don't know. that amount. So instead of 1 quart, it'd be 2 quarts. So you have to weigh out how much you pay per year on gas prices or electric prices. Now, the thing is, like I said, you need to dry it out for 2 years, and these guys just don't dry it out. So you really need to go there, test it, all that stuff, or tell the guy, you bring it out, if they're going to deliver it, if it's not less than 20%, you're not buying it, you're just going to take it back. That way they make the trip on their own, at their own risk. But like I said about Europe, they're running out of fuel. Germany's out of firewood now. Poland's out of coal. UK, I think that in 1 week, I read that heating cost went up 1,000%. It's just crazy. Well, here in the United States, it seems like it's still pretty reasonable that we're not under threat, but it could get us under threat. So I was reading an article today about Colorado. 22,000 residents have signed up to get their heating cost, or their electric cost, I guess, reduced to this program where the company can regulate your thermostat. And so they get like a $100 sign-up bonus and $25 a year refund on their electric if they sign up for this thing. So 22,000 people signed up for it. 6 years now they've been on this program. And usually what happens, they go to the thermostat and it's at 80 degrees, and they can turn it back down to whatever temperature they want. They just tell them that they recommend 80 degrees. Well, the other day they went over to the thermostat and it was locked at 80 degrees. Some people were saying 80 degrees in the house. It was locked. They couldn't adjust it. It was the first time in 6 years that the company had locked it. Of course, they signed up for it. So it was their own doing that got them into this trap. Of course, they're furious that the company would lock the thermostat, but they signed up for it, so their own problem. I posted a community post and said, do you think the government or a corporation should be able to regulate your air conditioning temperature or your heating temperature? And everybody, of course, said no. I think 96% of people said no. One person commented and said, I was in heating and air conditioning, and if you have one of those thermostats they can regulate, you can change those out pretty easy. Just go and get yourself a new thermostat and change it out. Well, of course, they've signed a contract, so there might be some penalties and laws that are violating by doing that. So be aware of that. So I got to do some research because I got to wondering, could the government regulate our temperatures in our homes? Currently, there's no place in the United States that the government regulates it. But I have a theory. So I looked into Europe, and there are a lot of countries in Europe that are regulating temperature, especially in organizations, movie theaters and restaurants. They were saying like 80 degrees that they have to keep the temperature at. Now in homes, they haven't regulated it yet. And that's the way it seems to always be here in the United States. They don't regulate the house. They regulate the company. So I could say, oh yeah, they probably would regulate restaurants in here. And so, yeah, they'll pass a law and then all the restaurants. But here's what I got to thinking. Here's how our government in the United States always works, is they don't regulate the people. They regulate the organizations that regulate the people. For example, taxes is a perfect example. You know, you'll hear a politician say, we're gonna raise taxes on the rich and companies. So Walmart is getting taxed more. So they charge us the tax. So that's how governments filter down to us regulating us, is through the organization. The organization is not going to take a hit. They're just going to pass the cost on to us. So I suspect that the United States will start regulating your temperature in the house. The government will regulate your temperature. And the way they'll do it is they'll go to the organization and they're going to say, we are going to restrict you. Now, you know, there's this new movement about the environment. I can't use the terms, otherwise I get in trouble. But you know what I'm talking about. It's been in the news for generations now, decades at least. They will go to the organization and they'll say, look, you're only allowed to produce or sell so many megawatts of electricity every day. And if you go over that amount, we're going to penalize you. So the organization will go out to the customer and say, okay, we would like to install a thermostat in your house that regulates your temperature. And if you do that, we'll give you a discounted rate on your electric. Great, hey, that's awesome. So you go and you'll install this device, and every time they go over the megawatts or close to the megawatts regulated by the government, they will shut your air conditioner off or your heater off. Now with the customers that they can't get the thermostat in, they'll just jack your rates up So you will want to reduce the amount of electricity that you're using. And it'll be a ridiculous price too. You will either decide, well, no, I'll go ahead and get the thermostat, or you'll just shut it off yourself. Now, again, this is just my theory, but it seems pretty logical that's the direction we're heading in, especially since the technology already exists to regulate from afar. Now, for those who say, oh, just change the thermostat out, wouldn't you think that eventually they're not going to make the thermostat on the wall, that somehow they'll be able to control it from your transformer on the pole? That they'll say, oh, you've already used too much electricity, and so they reduce the amount of electricity that you can have. So if your air conditioner kicks on, your breaker shuts off or something like that. So this brings me back to, off-grid living, wood stoves. Of course, there's a lot of states that don't allow you to have a wood stove. They'll put it into the code, or they'll say your insurance rates will go up higher if you have a wood stove. They'll tell you, the fire department, for example, not to put out the fire. Your house catches on fire if you have a wood stove. They'll come out and put everything else out, but they won't put your house out. So there's a lot of control already here in the United States trying to regulate out wood stoves. And that makes sense. I mean, they think that wood stoves are very pollutant and bad for the environment. But again, these new wood stoves are very efficient. They're burning almost everything that is produced now. Some of the wood stoves, I think, burn almost like everything. Mine's like 85%, but it's a pretty cheap one. You can get some of these really nice ones. It's like a gas stove. It's perfect. You slide in the vent and the flame goes down. You pull out the vent, the flame goes up, just like a gas stove. Whereas mine, it's kind of sporadic. It doesn't work that way. It goes down after a while, but most of the time it's just a beautiful flame. I really am suggesting that you come out to an area like this where it's just not regulated. You build yourself a little tiny house or put a shed in it, get yourself a wood stove, $300 off Facebook Marketplace, brand new stove, and you provide your own freedom. Stop asking the government to give you your freedom. They're just not going to do it anymore. They are lawmakers, not law erasers. Somebody thought that I should advocate for voting, and I'm not against voting. Yeah, go vote. But voting has never made a difference in my lifetime. Voting only causes more politicians and more corruption. And I all know there are a lot of people in my audience, oh no, we had a great president. But the country is absolute chaos. You think things are getting better by your own party, but the next one is just completely erased and we're all scared to death again. We shouldn't live in a country that we're scared to death in. Find your own freedom. And right here it is. So if you'll click that screen in the product list and check that out, I'd appreciate it. Otherwise, if you'll click that super thanks button down there, I really appreciate it. So I hope I can inspire you to find your own freedom so you can live your dreams. Thanks for watching.